Okay, um, this is intended as a discussion of what is democracy and why is it necessary, and to kind of get that conversation started, I've got about 15 slides just to that are intended just to generate conversation, and we can talk about them as we go along. Um, and the reason I wanted to kind of get this basis out there is that in our culture, this basis of these slides to start with is that our culture doesn't doesn't actually talk well about rule by the people, about democracy, about how that system works, and what we typically refer to as democracy in our culture um, are things like the Constitution, which are not democratic and were not designed to be democratic. And you can know that by going and reading the writings of the people who wrote the Constitution, who told us that they were not designing a democracy. Go and read Federalist 10, for example. So let's start and just sort of go through what these slides are and get some of these ideas kind of flowing a little bit. Um, Okay, we're going to talk about two sections. The first is what is democracy, and the first is why is it necessary, and the second is why is it necessary. Um, Democracy means rule by the people. If you think about that phrase a little bit, this is as much a definition of what it means to be a person living in a democracy as it is a definition of democracy itself. A person living in a democracy is a ruler of their democracy. There are two characteristics common to all rulers. All rulers have direct power over law and policy, and all rulers receive pay and benefits for their work ruling. Let's just stop here for a minute and talk about this. Does that make sense to people? People have any questions about that? Um, what are people's thoughts about that?
When you say receive pay and benefits for their work ruling, what is that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, the president receives a salary. The president of every
Okay,
country
okay,
around the world receives a salary, and
okay,
they receive benefits along with that salary.
okay. All right. I just, because when I first hearing it, meaning like if we rule over our democracy, am I
Mhm.
reading that to mean we receive pay and benefits? And, specifically if that's what you were talking about, but if you are elected to rule in the democracy, there's where the pay and benefits come in.
Well, but the issue is that in an actual democracy, the people are the rulers.
Right. Which is why I was a little confused.
Right. So the people have to do work to do the ruling.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
people need to be paid for their work ruling the country.
Okay. So I got it. Got
So
it.
for example, I would not support a universal basic income. I would support paying people for their work ruling the country.
Right.
Okay, I
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
and there is a lot of work, and different people put in different amounts of work, but there is a lot of work to do to understand what the issues are and learn, learn about the candidates and how the
For
system
sure.
works and all of that stuff.
So what would that look like then?
What would um, what
What
would
you're
pay and benefits
describing look like?
look like for that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's we can have a long discussion about that. What I would say is just an idea that that I would put out there, and I think that we have to have a discussion and come to a decision about collectively come to a decision about what makes the most sense.
Right.
From my
Right.
perspective, I would say something like I would say something like um, uh, you have people that are involved at different levels, uh,
Right.
and they should be paid accordingly. So you have some people that are involved just at the level of voting. Now, there's a lot
Yeah,
more going to be involved in that if we actually have rule by the people.
right.
So, that should be sort of the base level. That would be like the level that I would say is like is the equivalent of the UBI. You're not getting paid just a basic income. You're getting paid for doing work
Okay.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
And then you have, higher, you have higher levels of participation. Like maybe you have people like us who are involved in the in or organizing the party and
Right.
doing other work like that. That might be a different level of
Right.
compensation.
Okay. I'm tracking
Um,
with what you. It makes sense.
hmm
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts about this?
No,
No.
she hit it right on the nail. I didn't understand what it meant, but you explained it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. So right now we are not a democracy. We do not receive pay and benefits for the work we do ruling. In fact, it costs us resources to participate in government. Consequently, the more resources you have, the more power influence you have. That's plutocracy, rule by the wealthy, not democracy, rule by the people. We do not have power over our governments. We have virtually zero power over law or policy. At the state level, we can, with great effort, run ballot initiatives. With great effort and great expense, run ballot initiatives to take some power over law and policy. But that's very difficult and very expensive and doesn't happen all that often. We have almost we only have power over who has power over law and policy. Okay, and we don't have much power over who has power, who is allowed to have power over law and policy because of the pre-political elite filtering, the money primary, voter suppression, gerrymandering, etc. Okay. So it's virtually impossible to remove electeds before the end of their term. So at the state level and lower levels, we have very burdensome and complicated ways of removing people. And at the federal level, we don't have any way of removing people. The grassroots, the people of the country have no way of removing federal electeds. And once our representatives pass a policy, it's virtually impossible to change it. We have to go through the referendum process at the state level, and at the national level, there's a whole other. We don't even have that direct democracy of referendums. So it becomes nearly impossible for individual people to organize and make change. And we see that. I mean, we see that, for example, the right has spent 40 years on the project that's brought us to the place that we are now. That took them a long time, okay? And we haven't really pushed back against it. But what we need to do is we need to push back against the idea that this is the way that things should be, that it should be very, very difficult for the people to have power over their government. That's what we want to, that's what we really need to change. So our processes are undemocratic. They make it impossible for the people to actually rule themselves. Any thoughts or questions on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when people say that not a we're not a democracy, that we're a
hmm
constitutional republic,
Mm.
like what? Explain to me what that means.
Well, first of all, that's a lie.
Okay.
Because again, I would suggest reading Federalist 10. In the Constitution, the Constitution does not use the word democracy a single time, not even once. The Constitution says that we are promised a republican form of government, quote unquote, republican form of government, like the republic that you were talking about. But if you go and read what the authors of the Constitution explained about what they mean by republic. Okay, they told us what republic in the Constitution means. That's in Federalist 10. And they say very explicitly, by a republic, we mean a system where a tiny few are selected by some to rule over all. Rule by the few is just oligarchy. So if you're so saying that we are a quote constitutional republic is just completely bullshit. The fact is that we are a plutocratic oligarchy ruled by the wealthy few with a constitution. But for example, we're seeing right now that the issue is that we are in fact a country of rule by the wealthy few because they're just ignoring the constitution. It's just a document. It doesn't force them to do anything other than, spout off rhetoric about, excuses for why they're violating it this way or that way.
So I'm going to plead ignorance here then.
Hmm?
If within the Constitution or they don't mention democracy, then where does the fact that we are a democracy, where does that come from?
Political rhetoric.
Okay.
I mean, for example, one of the greatest lies ever told was told by Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address, where he comes to the crescendo and says, "Let us hereby firmly resolve that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth." When he spoke those words, he governed a country where it was necessary, where in order to vote, you had to be wealthy because we didn't eliminate the poll tax until 1964, 101 years after he gave the speech. Okay, you had to be white and you had to be male. Okay, so that meant that at that time something like 2% of the population was allowed to vote at all. Okay. So he says, government of the people, for the people, by the people shall not perish from the earth. He's just lying. Okay. And that lie has been repeated to us again and again and again and again and again by the media, by our schools, in our textbooks, from our teachers, and that's gotten implanted in us. So the idea that we live in a democracy has never has never been real. It's always been an illusion created by propaganda.
And it feels that's become so obvious right now. I mean, like I'm surprised at what I'm learning right now. Because I was always under that same impression that we're a democracy. And you know, finding out we're really not is like, what do you do? How do you what do you do? So
Well,
anyway,
but let me give you some hope about that.
yeah, yeah.
Um, your experience demonstrates that the vast majority of people want to have a democracy. They've been convinced that they want to have a democracy by the political rhetoric that was an illusion covering the fact that it's not really a democracy, but that's what they want because and that's what people have wanted for thousands of years. Okay. So I'm sorry, it seems like you wanted to say something.
No, no, no. I just so I'm. It makes me wonder if this election in New York or this primary in New York is more evidence of that. That maybe really, I have felt it personally that the progressive movement is the more um, democratic, so to
Mhm.
speak. Um, and so, anyways, just interesting. Very interesting.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this?
Not from me.
Okay. Demisha?
No, just like she said, I'm learning a lot, and you're absolutely right. When you said what is democracy, I'm just thinking like, uh, okay, it's for the people by the people, and that's what I always thought. But the way that it's working out now, it's just like you said, it's just a piece of document, and nobody don't have to follow it. And like she said, what do we do? And I know you're going to give us some solutions. What do we do because we want a democracy for the people by the people?
Yep. 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 Yep.
I feel like a little bit what we do is we infiltrate where we can and we make it happen.
Right.
I mean,
Like that,
like
Michelle. Yes.
and
Yeah.
infiltrate. I don't mean that in a bad or a negative way, but
It's called
We,
good trouble. We want to get
yeah,
into
we
some good trouble.
good
Yes.
trouble and put ourselves in places to make that happen in all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of ways. But anyways, okay, I'm gonna hit mute again.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. No, no problem. So here I talked about, our processes aren't democratic. Let's get some specific things. A democratic process embodies these two principles. All people are always in control of their political power. All people have equal power over all decisions of their government, either by direct vote or by delegated vote. Um, so we have quote unquote representatives, but the fact of the matter is that those representatives have no incentive to do anything that we want, except in their rhetoric around election time. Okay, because we cannot recall them. Certainly at the federal level and at the state or local level, it's very, very difficult, and we cannot overrule their decisions. Okay, so once they're elected, they are effectively kings of their vote. They have no responsibility to anyone to cast their vote in any particular way to serve any particular constituency. Um, and the only time that we have to hold them accountable is at election time. So, for example, it's perfectly easy for wealthy people to fund a whole group of candidates to go and to go and run on things like for example, Newsom, for example, ran on universal single payer. And then when it actually was coming up and was going to pass the California legislature, he moved heaven and earth to prevent it from passing instead of assist it to pass, like he had promised during the campaign. Okay, so by having this, by allowing our system to give us only one control point at the time of election and having no control after that, we give all of the control to whoever is able to influence those people, and the people that are influencing them are the people with money, because we've allowed our system um, to be organized in such a way that politicians need massive amounts of money in order to get elected. So the constituency that they serve are the 1%. They don't have any incentive. Once they're in office, they don't have any incentive to consistently serve the 99%. Okay. And we have all kinds of anti democratic processes uh, in the US at every level, from local all the way up to national, and in the parties, in the MDP, in the same way. So we have, for example, the Electoral College. The only power the Electoral College has is to reverse the decision of the people. That's the only power it has. It's specifically there to thwart the people's choice. And that's, the people that the authors of the Constitution make that perfectly clear in the Federalist Papers. We have winner take all elections, which if we had majority elections, majority winner elections, that would mean that winner take all elections strip up to 49% of people of their power. Okay, because if you have if you have a candidate that wins with 51% of the vote and they get all the power, and the 49% of people don't get any power. Okay. Did you follow that? Okay. Or if, and we have worse than that though, because we have plurality winner elections. So for example, plurality winner means that you just get the most votes. It doesn't matter if you got a majority or not, just as long as you get the most. So for example, Hitler won power in Germany with 33% of the vote because they had plurality winner elections. Clinton won in 92 with 43% of the vote. He didn't have a majority. He disenfranchised 57% of the population. Okay. Uh, uh, um, in 2016, Trump didn't win a majority. He got 47% of the vote, so he disenfranchised 53% of the population. And that's just the population that actually showed up to vote, not actually the population of the country or the eligible voting population. Um, so we also divide people geographically, which unequally distributes power. So, for example, in the state of Michigan, you might have a majority for lots of significant climate change legislation, for example. But if you split those constituencies up, in any given section in any given congressional district, maybe you don't have a majority for that. Okay, so that you can't elect candidates that actually support the policies of the majority. The gerrymandering allows you to divide up the majority in such a way that they have that only a that you can't elect candidates like that support the majority position. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does ranked choice voting like take away some of these issues?
Ranked choice voting takes away some of these issues, like it alleviates the winner take all and the plurality winner election. Okay, it eliminates some of the issues there. It doesn't do anything for dividing people geographically. That's gerrymandering. It doesn't do anything for apportionment of the legislature. For example, if you look at how the how the Senate is apportioned, the U.S. Senate. Okay, um, in Michigan we have 10 million people. We get two senators. In Wyoming they have 600,000 people. They get two senators. Consequently, a Michigander has 1/17 the power in the Senate of a Wyomingite. Okay, not even 3/5.
Okay, is it because it's figured out by like square foot? I mean, is it how does that how does how does that happen that way?
It happens that way because it was designed to be that way. The Senate was designed to be to be a excuse me a second. The Senate was designed to be a brake on popular will. Okay, so the Senate apportions membership to each state. So it's by land. It's by land. It's not by population. Okay, so they're saying people don't matter as far as the Senate is concerned. What matters is land. Okay, that's left over from feudalism. Okay, um, uh, but and this is not. I mean, it's not just the Senate, by the way. If you do the numbers, so for example, if we were to have equal representation in the Senate, if you and I and everyone in Michigan had the same representation in the Senate as everyone in Wyoming has, Michigan would elect 34 senators. California would elect 136. If you do that same calculation across the whole country, you find that we are missing 982 senators. Okay. We have about a tenth of the senators that we ought to have. Okay. We are also missing 106 members of the House of Representatives because of the way that they're apportioned. It's a bit more complicated than the Senate. But because we have capped the number of representatives in our legislature, but the population keeps going up, that has to be reapportioned every time we do a census. And the way that we reapportion it makes it less and less and less representative of the people. So, for example, originally, the idea was they didn't put this in the Constitution, but the idea was that a House district would be 30,000 people. Okay, we have House districts in California that are 800,000 people or more, I think, now. Um, So, then we have things like appointments rather than elections. Like, for example, if you notice, the Supreme Court is insulated from the people in several different ways. You don't elect the president directly. You have the Electoral College. The president appoints the Supreme Court. Okay. A little more than 100 years ago, you didn't elect senators directly either. The state legislature elected senators until 1913. Okay, so at that time you had two steps between the grassroots and the people that were appointing and confirming the Supreme Court. Okay, and we've changed that a little bit, but we still have that two-step process. We now elect senators directly, but with that apportionment problem, we have a tiny number of people in Wyoming and the Dakotas and places like that who are massively overrepresented in the Senate making those kinds of decisions. So it's still taken out of the hands of the actual population of the country. Any questions about this so far or anything else? Okay. Okay. So we're not a democracy. We don't have democratic processes. Our processes were never designed to be democratic because the Constitution was not designed to be the Constitution of a democracy. It was designed to be the Constitution of a plutocratic oligarchy, of a system of rule by the wealthy few. So uh so just to get sort of a bigger picture perspective on this, um across any population, there are only so many ways to distribute power. Okay. You can either give power to everyone equally, or on the one hand, so I would say that's the left position, give power to everyone equally. Okay. Or you have and on the far end, on the other far end of the spectrum, you have give power to no one. Okay, you have everything run by the rules. No person has power, only the rules. One step one step to the left from autocracy, which is rule by the rules, is monarchy and oligarchy. A monarchy is just the most extreme form of oligarchy. Oligarchy means rule by the wealthy few. Monarchy is just rule by one, which is just one version of a few. Um, and and on this distribution spectrum, you can see, I say anarchism on the far left because everyone has equal power over everything, and everyone must agree. To get everybody to agree to anything is really, really difficult. So that's going to cause a whole bunch of friction, and not a lot is going to get done, which is why it's called anarchy. Okay, but then you have then you can move into the democracy section, the democracy area of the spectrum, and you start talking about everyone has equal power. Okay, but we don't all have to agree. Okay, we establish some threshold by which we can agree, and we can look at who shares power. We can say, well, we want to make sure that everybody always has power over the decisions of their government, but we can delegate some of that power so that people can go and do the work that we need them to do to come up with these policies and refine them into something that is a clear proposal that can be passed and implemented. Okay, and then we can have a number of those proposals, and the delegates can select one, and then the people can look at that and go yes or no. Okay, or maybe the delegates can provide a list of alternatives, and the people can look at those and say which one they prefer. And we can keep going along, along this path and find a place in that area where we're ensuring that everybody has equal power over all of the decisions of government through either direct vote, which would doesn't have to be like all the time, but you can use direct vote, or through delegation, which means that you give some other people the ability, the authority to get together and come up with proposals and pass proposals, but those proposals passed are subject to review and to review and overturning by the people. It fundamentally has to always come back to the people get to decide what those decisions are. And the dividing line here, that the middle line, this line here, is pretty much the difference between when you have where you have delegated power and where you have representative power, where you have power that actually stays with the people and where you have power that actually goes to the representatives. Does that all make sense? Any thoughts or questions about this?
No, it makes sense.
It makes sense, but currently that line is farther to the right. It should be farther to the right for our current reality.
Right. Well, I mean, here you see where I would put the MDP, DNC, USA, China, and Russia. Okay. Um, for example, the MDP uh, has all kinds of things like those anti-democratic processes that we just went through to ensure that the actual people don't have the power. Um, and China and Russia are only a little bit farther um, to the right. Um, the difference is that we have this whole mythology of democracy. So, for example, when I challenged the chair of the MDP a few years ago about some of the stuff that she was about how she was doing about a process she was using. She was using an appointment process where the rules require an election process. Okay, and her response was, "Well, we're voting on it, so therefore it's democratic." Okay, voting on something doesn't automatically make it democratic. The question that you have to ask is who gets to vote, and how much power do they actually have over the outcome, and how did they get how did they attain the right the authority to vote on that. And if you have an appointment process, you have very different situation than if you have an election process and over those categories. Go ahead, Michelle.
Is there an awareness within like the MDP, the DNC, of all of these, or that that's what's happening, that this is our system, or are they just blissfully unaware? I mean, really thinking this is a democracy. I mean, is there an awareness on their behalf that this is how things are?
Absolutely not. My experience of these people, including people in very high positions of power, is that they recognize that there are problems, but they fundamentally believe that the system is democratic. And that's just not true. The problem is that the system is fundamentally undemocratic, but they believe that it is. Yeah.
And my guess is these sessions here are about educating so that there does become an awareness that this is what's happening. I'm like, it's clicking why this is so important.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah. Any other questions here, or can I go on?
go ahead. I'm good.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think whoops. So is just another way of looking at the same thing. and an emphasis about delegate versus representative. So you can see if you look across anarchism, everybody has power over everything. Power is shared equally, and everyone must agree. Like we said before, that could potentially be problematic to get things done. Um, uh, uh, then we have democracy, where all people have power. Some power is delegated over what? Well, everything. Some of it delegated, and power is shared equally or delegated proportionately. And how many must agree? A consensus, a majority, or a supermajority. Um, um, and then you have oligarchy and autocracy. There's just a way of, sort of thinking about what these things, actually mean. Um, any questions about this?
No, not yet.
Okay. Okay. So, what is democracy? Democracy is a system for organizing groups that requires cooperating individuals maintain their individuality, which is independence. Each individual's preferences, their votes, are given equal weight. Individuals retain their political power at all times, even if delegated. Individuals receive pay and benefits for their work governing. That's what rule by the people is. Um, uh, for any questions about that?
No.
Sort of a summary here. So in the next discussion session, we want to talk about what are the cultural values that a culture needs to have in order to actually organize this way. What are the processes? What kinds of processes can be used to organize this way that doesn't undermine this kind of organizing? What kind of institutions are necessary to grow thriving democratic communities that use the power of self-government? So any final questions here on this section on what is democracy?
I have a question. Is
Yeah,
there a country in the world that has a true democracy right now?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Most countries, there are many countries that have more democratic systems than ours in some ways, often in many ways, but they are almost always subject to the same problems of representatives versus delegates and money in politics. That create some level of control by the wealthy over the political process. For example, just the entire way that we have in our culture of thinking about politics and economics drives that situation, because we think of them as separate. But actually, if you go back, for example, Adam Smith did not think of politics and economics as separate. He didn't call himself an economist, he called himself a political economist. That's the same for all the quote unquote economics people, all the way up through Marx. They called themselves political economists because they recognized that politics is is a system for making decisions binding on an entire group. Okay, and economics is a system for making economic decisions that are binding on an entire group. So, an economics is always embedded inside of politics. They are never separate. When we talk about them separately, that is a narrative move by the dominant ideology to prevent people from connecting these two things and understanding how power flows between them. So now, why is democracy necessary? So we know from the science of the wisdom of crowds that, and I mean, this is this is deeply research stuff that you can go and you can go and look up. I've just pulled up one particular research paper, but there are thousands. There are many of many research papers you can go and look at. Um, uh, the wisdom of crowds tells us that in order to ensure that a group makes the best decisions the most often, okay, and by a significant margin, okay, that group needs to be large, it needs to be diverse. Large plus diverse means inclusive. It needs to have people that come to their conclusions independently and aggregate their preferences equally. Okay, they have to come to their in order, because if you're going to have a large and diverse group. If people stop coming to their conclusions independently, that reduces diversity. Okay, because people are making their decisions based on what somebody else told them to do. Okay, bandwagoning or something like that. Okay, so that reduces the diversity of the group. Okay. um uh so for example, social influences, like the idea, this whole pushing of blue no matter who, that reduces the ability of a group to make the best decisions possible. Okay. um so and this right here is an area of conflict between the way that people typically think about things and the way that science demonstrates actually works, which is that people typically think, well, we need to get the experts together. We need to, Plato talked about having a group of experts rule the country. Okay, we have plenty of literature explaining why it's important that experts run everything. Okay, and what the wisdom of crowds demonstrates is that experts underperform the crowd, even in their area of expertise. Okay, not always. Occasionally, the group of experts will come up with a better decision. Okay, but on average, over time, the crowd will outperform the experts, especially if the experts are members of the crowd. Okay, and let's be clear, a crowd is not a mob. A mob is not organized. A crowd is organized so that, number one, people come to their conclusions independently, and number two, they aggregate their preferences equally. You have to have organization to make that happen. Okay. So, um, so any questions on this on this here so far? The wisdom of crowds. Okay. So this is so we want democracy because it feels like the morally right thing to do, and I agree, it does feel like the morally right thing to do. It's also the scientifically correct way to go about making the best decisions possible the most often. Any way that we undermine the size, diversity, independence, or equality, uh, reducing any of those ensures is an attempt to make sure that we make worse decisions. Okay. Democracy creates collective intelligence. Accessing our collective intelligence requires three things: a community of cooperating individuals who organize themselves to grow independent thinkers and make decisions by aggregating all preferences equally. Democracy is necessary to access our collective intelligence. Collective intelligence is necessary to assure better decision making more often. Better decisions more often equals good government. Therefore, democracy is necessary for good government. Diversity and inclusion increase collective intelligence. So increasing our collective intelligence requires two things: increasing the size of our society and increasing the diversity of our society, which means including inclusivity. Diversity and inclusivity are necessary for collective intelligence to grow. Therefore, Equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion are necessary for improving good government and improving the quality of government decisions. This is just science, not speculation.
It also seems like common sense,
Yeah,
just it, yeah.
yeah. Sustainable management is good government. Um, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Eleanor Ostrom before, but Eleanor Ostrom is a won the 2009 Nobel Prize in Economics for her research on common resource management. Okay, we have this fairy tale about the tragedy of the commons. That if you hold everything in common, everybody will just exploit the commons and pay no attention to maintaining it, and it will just be destroyed. And that seems to be true when everything is motivated by the profit motive, because then however much you can extract, you know, that's the way that's the way that system always behaves. It extracts and extracts and extracts and doesn't consider the consequences of extracting. Um, 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 what Ostrom demonstrated is she went around the world for decades, I think like 30 years, and researched where there were systems for managing common resources, where like fisheries, for example, or watersheds or things like that. Okay, and what she found is that in every one of the systems that she found where they managed their resources well and sustainably, they had these 8 core design principles. Okay, authority to self-govern is just democracy. If we want to do democracy well, we need to have the wisdom of crowds and all of the stuff that we've just talked about. Um, you need to have shared identity and purpose, and what I'm doing here as the value, what it means to value Ostrom's 8 CDPs, and what that means that we have to value in terms of how we engage with each other. So, authority to self govern. If we want to value Ostrom's CDP of authority to self govern, we have to value democracy and collective intelligence. If we're going to value shared identity and purpose, we need to embrace independence and cooperation, um, and so on. Any thoughts or questions about this?
This is good.
Okay, so democracy is necessary for Ostrom's 8 CDPs. Ostrom's 8 CDPs are necessary for good government. Therefore, democracy is necessary for good government. This is not, this is just straightforward. This is what people who have actually gone and looked at the world in both in both the areas of collective intelligence and common resource management have found that in both of these areas, in order to get the best results, you need to have democracy. Real democracy, ruled by the people, like what we talked about before. So, key takeaways from this: democracy means individuals always hold equal power over all government decisions by delegation, not representation. The people receive fair compensation for their work ruling. The people rule every decision of their government directly or by delegation. And democracy is necessary for good government, making better decisions by accessing collective wisdom and managing common resources well and sustainably. Okay. And any questions about this? It's just sort of like putting everything together here.
It feels like it's an insurmountable task to make our government be a true democracy.
Well, like Nelson Mandela says, it's always impossible until it's done.
Well,
Um,
right, right.
right. Yeah, yeah. But I also wanna give a little bit of hope with the next slide. This is the last slide. What I've given you is a very, broad overview. But everything that I've talked about here can be made very very technical and very precise. And when you do that, democracy is an attractor in the phase space of the power distribution function. That means that once we get a little of it, we have a tremendous motivation to get more. Okay, which is why they use the rhetoric of democracy, even though they don't actually embody the reality of democracy. Okay, they use the rhetoric of democracy because it's attractive, because it makes a lot of sense, because it gets better decisions. And we have, if you look around the world at places that are where people are the most happy, for example, in the Nordic countries, okay, what do you see? You have strong democracies or much stronger democracies than what we have. Okay, um, they still are not. They still are not fully there. They're still under the suppression of the representatives and the money, but they have a lot more. Those systems provide a lot more to the people, so they're able to organize better and continue to maintain better resources for the people, even though they're still controlled by the 1%.
Do you feel like there's almost an unaware, this, I don't know how to phrase this, like people are aware that that not necessarily that we're not a democracy, but that clearly the government is not working for them, and that's why, as we see as Democrats, we're losing elections because people are like getting wise to this whole thing and like thinking, why do I invest? Why do I even show up to vote, when the end reality is the government isn't working for us anymore, if it ever really did. Um,
Right,
anyway, just
right. No, I mean, no, I mean, for example, um, the reason that that turnout to our elections is so low is
yeah,
because people don't have faith that there's any value to voting.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And the reason they don't have faith that there's any value to voting is, I mean, back in 2014, for example, I think it was Princeton or Stanford released a study that demonstrated that the desires of the people have almost no impact on the outcomes of government.
Mm-hmm,
That the desires of the wealthy have significant impact on the outcomes of
mm-hmm,
government.
mm-hmm,
Okay. So this is something that, you know, the the vast majority of people recognize. It's sort of like in the Democratic Party. I've been telling people for years that that not having fair and democratic rules drives people away from the party. And they and literally like the executive director of the party, I would say that to her, and she'd say, "Nobody knows or cares about the rules except you." And my response to that is people don't need to know the rules to know when they're not being treated fairly.
mm-hmm. And when they're
Um,
not being
That's
represented.
right, Leano, because even though I don't know all the rules, but I can tell, and the folks that I've been speaking with can tell that they're not being treated fairly. So just to make that statement alone is just distasteful.
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. No, I agree entirely. This is and this is at every level of our society. We have plenty of people that don't participate in our elections. In the Democratic Party, we have plenty of people that come in and try for a little while and then leave. You know, and I mean, we're a state of 10 million people. We ought to have a party of hundreds of thousands to millions of people. We have a party of 8 to 10,000 people. The reason we have a party of 8 to 10,000 people is because people come in, they see how it works, and they're not interested.
Right. I'm going to go back to my phrase: the two parties are two cheeks of the same ass. You
Yeah.
know, it's just it's frustrating, and I can see why people get frustrated. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel it myself. You know, just dipping my toe in the water.
hmm
It's just ugh. But that said, does feel like maybe there's some forward progress happening. Um,
Well,
you
I
know,
mean, I hope so. these things develop over years, and it's hard to combat an establishment. I mean, let's be clear what I mean by an establishment. An establishment is a network of individuals, organizations, and stories about how to interact with people,
Mhm.
that that maintains its power by bending, abusing, or breaking the rules, or sometimes even just rewriting the rules if they've gained enough power, which that they've gained that power a long time ago, in our situation. Um, so um, uh, uh, so uh, and that establishment, when I say it, is stories. Stories are a very important piece of it. Okay, because for example, there are stories that the establishment has about why it can't support universal single payer. There are stories the establishment has about why it's okay for them to do this and not that, or this and not that, or that and not this, etc. There are stories that they have about, for example, why it's okay to not support the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, even though they've been screaming "blue no matter who" at us for decades.
Like,
Okay,
money, money, money.
that's right. There's that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Because the establishment has one principle. That principle is, do what the donors say, and maintain our power so that we continue to serve the interests of the donors.
The Democratic Party is going to continue to lose elections until they get away from that mindset.
Yep, that's what
I
it's.
mean, it is, and I don't know. I think you had an interview. Was it an interview with somebody or a conversation about how, um, it's going to blow up. The whole thing is going to blow up, like after World War II, and things are going to have to get rewritten. The Green New, not the Green New Deal, the New Deal, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to learn until it's too late. That's what it
Well,
feels like.
yeah.
What it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. So my thing, and the reason that I organize in the Democratic Party right now is because the structures that are set up make it virtually impossible for a third party to make any headway
Mhm.
because of things like winner take all, plurality winner, first past the post elections.
Right.
Okay. Um, and so and I mean, so I think that we ought to be working on third parties, but I think that the people working on third parties and the people working on on reforming the Democratic Party should be allies, and we should
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, the people that are working on third parties should join us in the Democratic Party and show up to vote,
Hmm.
our people,
Hmm.
so that we can reform the party.
Hmm.
They don't have to participate any more than about once every 2 years
Right.
if they don't want to. That's when we elect our state level and state, county, and congressional district representatives in the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
We call them delegates, but they're not. They actually function as representatives. That's a euphemism, and there are lots of euphemisms that these people use, um, to to make it seem like there's some kind of democracy.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, and that's one of them. They say delegate, but if you actually look at how about if you actually look at what the parameters of being a delegate are, it's actually a representative. Um, uh, yeah, and so we have a structure in this country that's very, very difficult to dislodge, from the outside. And I think it's easier to dislodge from the inside because, for example, the Michigan Democratic Party only has 10,000 members in a state of 10 million. Okay. Um, uh, and let's be clear, only about a quarter of those members show up to vote at a typical state convention. So if we can get about 5,000 or so uh, people to show up to the state convention once every other year, okay, we can win the majority of the state central committee. We can win the chairmanship of the party, and we can make the party democratic, really democratic in the way that we've just been discussing, so that people have real control over who's going to be their delegates, and we'll actually have delegates and and over what kind of policies are promoted by the elected delegates, because we'll have control over the platform and the ability to enforce the platform. One of the key ways that the 1% gets away with controlling the party and not allowing the people to control the party is that we don't have enforceable platforms. Okay. And I mean, literally, I've been laughed at by elected representatives when I said we need to have an enforceable platform. Um, and they don't want that because if we have an enforceable platform, then the people get to tell the representatives what to do instead of the representatives being able to tell the people what to do because that's what their donors told them to do.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Because
Yeah.
because what happens now is that when the donors go to the politicians, they say, "You're going to do this for me, or I'm not going to give you the money." And when the people go to the politicians and say, "We want you to do this," the politician says, "Well, that's nice. That's a really great idea. Well, we love that idea." Da, 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 da. And then they go and do what their donors said
Mhm.
because the people have no leverage over the politicians.
Right. I sent a letter to, is it Bridget Hubbard at the MDP about when the next meetings and stuff are, and I've not heard anything. So
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like anything's planned.
No, well, well, I mean, I give Hertel a little bit of grace in that I know that the situation that he walked into was really really messed up. So, for example, um, Kathy Albro has requested the details about a bunch of appeals committee rulings. Okay, and there's a line in the bylaws. I think it's 12.7.1 that says that this must be made available to any member in good standing who requests it. Okay, they can't make it available because the previous administration, who was in power for 3 terms, never kept any records, even though it's required by the rules.
And why aren't there consequences for that? I mean, there should be you. I mean, I think as like when I think about running a nonprofit, like
Hmm.
you save everything. I mean, it just why are they allowed to not? It just that doesn't make sense to me. But again,
I, I,
to
will-
take to
I
the
I can
human
answer
hand.
that question explicitly and directly. You ready?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
money.
There are no consequences for that because judges are beholden to the parties for their future appointments or help getting elected. Okay. And
Mhm.
therefore, when you take a case that's about party governance to a judge, they say, well, that's just party governance. We're not going to be involved in that.
Is there a plan for Curtis to do things differently? I mean, has he said he's going to do things differently?
He has absolutely said he's going to do things differently. The question is, what will the establishment allow him to do, even if he tries?
Who? So
Because
who are the establishment people within the MDP?
so so let me say this for first of all, the vast majority of establishment people do not think of themselves as part of the establishment.
Okay.
Do not think that they're doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Do not think that there's any kind of problem like what we're talking about. Okay.
Mhm.
They think that there are, maybe there's a little problem over here or a little problem over there, but we just need to tweak this or tweak that, or, and everything will be fine. Okay. They are, the vast majority of them, nice, good, hardworking people who want to get things done. The problem is that because of the way that the party breaks the rules, and people coming in and trying to do stuff and finding it impossible and leaving, the people who are left are the people who just want to win elections, don't care about anything else.
Mhm.
Okay. They want to come in and do work and get and win elections and leave.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
but
if you have,
by not
what's
fixing
that?
this stuff, by not fixing this stuff and not addressing these issues, it's going to just continue. I mean, it's
Well, what the problem is that allows us, here and there, at some level to win some elections. Okay, I mean we win about 50% of the elections. Okay, but it never gives us the ability to win policy. Okay, because the people are concerned about the people involved in the party are only concerned about winning elections and not concerned about enforcing the policies that the people want on the electeds. Okay. So, and that's the result. That is that population of people being in the party who are willing to do that is the result of the system that's been in place in the party for many, many, many decades. Yeah. So, um, so, yeah, I mean, you were at what was the question that you had asked before that I don't think I finished answering it. What was your last
oh,
question?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but
Um,
I do.
oh, who in the party is the establishment? That was it. So I wanted to say that, like I said, most people in the establishment are perfectly fine people. Okay.
Mhm,
They
mhm.
don't recognize this, and they don't actually want to spend a lot of time on this because they want to go out and win elections.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, they
But
could win so many more elections.
right, no, we what we have to get across to them is that the purpose of a political party is not to win elections, it's to win policy change, it's to win
Mhm,
policy goals.
mhm, mhm.
Okay.
Right.
um and if we don't structure our party around winning policy goals, if we only structure our party around winning elections, then we'll never win policy goals.
Eh, How do you, I mean, you think like the whole my solidarity, the idea of getting those people in those seats, that's the way to do that? I'm, I mean, is that the how do you
Well,
fix it?
so it isn't enough to get people in those seats. We
Right.
also have to do the work to present the reforms that we need, um, in a way that we can engage the rest of the party that currently exists, including people in the establishment.
Hmm.
And we need to use that same strategy to engage people who are not in the party and bring them in, even if it's very minimally. I mean, if you know, if the any progressive or leftist, no matter what you think about how awful the Democratic Party is, um, in my opinion, ought to be willing to spend a few hours once every other year
Hmm.
to help a coalition of people that are trying to make change.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
I think that's a minimal ask
Hmm.
of people. Um, um, and we want to and we need a big push in order to get over the 50% threshold so that we can actually implement some of these changes. Once
Hmm.
we get there, we can make it much more easy to participate.
Hmm.
We can have a lot more virtual meetings so that membership can actually attend.
Hmm.
Uh, we can, insist on recording those so that membership who couldn't attend can see what's going on and hold their representatives, their delegates accountable.
Mhm.
Um, we can the make all of the processes in the party actually democratic, according to the what we've just gone over.
Right.
Um, I'm not, so I mean, and these are discussions that we have that have to be had. I mean, not like I didn't lay out a specific policy about how we're going to do this, in this presentation. But we need to have those discussions with people. We're not saying that we want to come in and impose on people, you're going to do it this way. I'm
Mhm.
saying that as a general principle, democracy is necessary to make good decisions and to manage our common resources sustainably. In the Democratic Party, that includes common resources like money and volunteer hours
Mhm.
and office space and et cetera.
Mhm.
And cultural capital, is another Democratic Party resource. Okay, to
Mhm.
manage those things well, we need democracy.
Mhm.
So this isn't willy nilly. This
Mhm.
is this is what the science says we need to do in order to have in order to have the best decision making and the best management of our common resources.
Right.
Um, so we need people who are going to convince other folks of that and move them along towards supporting that kind of a thing. That's what we need in the party.
Right.
Um, and if there are, like I said, if there are people that are outside that are outside the party and support this idea, they don't need to come in and be doing all this work necessarily, as long as they're willing to come in and vote for the people that are doing the work.
Right. Right.
Um, so it has to. We have to have a movement approach to this, which means that if we're a movement, we can have a group over here working on third parties, and they can also come over here and help us work on this, and we can go over there and help them work on the third parties.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, obviously the establishment has no objection to third parties because Eric Adams is running for mayor on a third party line, and it looks like Cuomo might as well. So clearly they don't have any problem with third parties. So if they make a complaint about it, we just, well, what's going on with Eric Adams or with Andrew Cuomo?
Mhm.
You know, why was that a problem? Or the guy in Buffalo that ran against India Walton on on a write-in thing.
Mhm.
Okay. Um. Or the establishment, only cares about third parties when progressives and leftists are talking about building third parties. They don't care at all about third parties as long if it's one of their folks that's going to run
Right.
on the third party ballot line.
Right.
So we need to just laugh at them when they make that when they make
Yeah.
those claims. Um. Uh. Yeah. So I'm sorry. And you had
No,
so
no, no. I just I feel like I had an interesting conversation with a woman who was a longtime Republican, and we were talking about Ionia County Democrats and the county party, and she's like, they're a mess. And anyways, it was interesting because I when I talked about my solidarity, I talked about how and getting involved with it, how they're not part of the Democratic Party, and I think frankly that is to the organization's advantage,
Mhm.
and that. But we're working with doing things within the party to try and make changes, and it was
Right.
just an interesting response. um
Hmm.
I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the whole idea of my solidarity is that we are a coalition member of the broad progressive coalition,
Hmm.
and operating in that way, we run candidates in Democratic Party elections,
Hmm.
just like the unions run candidates in Democratic Party elections.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
so I mean, you could think of us as we're not a labor union, we're a citizens union.
Right. I like that. Citizens union.
or or a people's union.
Well, I kept saying pro humanities. We're like pro anything human being
Yeah,
kind of a thing. Um,
human union. There's a guy that I talked to, and I think he's in Colorado that has well, likes this idea of calling it human unions. Um,
is there a movement like at a national level to do the same thing with the DNC?
so there is, but it has some of the same problems that we have at the state level,
Hmm.
um, uh, and um, yeah, isn't particularly effective yet. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean,
Well,
yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, no, I'll go back to when you first started this and talking about, being paid for the work. It's a lot. There's a lot of work involved.
Yeah,
And I mean, you've been at this a long time. Um, and it
yeah,
takes a lot of time but that's how they keep you down
yeah,
is, you know,
yeah. Right.
yeah,
The 1% have resources,
yeah,
and we
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Okay. The 1% will hire people to do this work for them, which
right.
is why they are effective.
Yeah,
They're as effective as they are.
yeah,
Because they can point resources at it.
right.
So, yeah, we need to generate resources and build power. I mean, for example, right now, um, uh, well, let me put it a different way. Campaign season is really kind of crazy because we have huge numbers of candidates across the state, all of whom have to do a bunch of things that are all the same, that require the same skills and all of that. Uh, and they all replicate those skills in their own campaigns. There's no reason that we should do that. We should have a campaign organization that provides that provides the skills and resources to get that accomplished for everyone. Maybe we need a staff of you know one to five people to do compliance for the campaigns across the state. Okay, and then the campaigns don't have to put resources into that.
And more efficient. I mean, I would think it would be way more efficient doing things that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or exactly. We should be taking advantage of uh, of um uh, of network effects that allow us to do things more efficiently, like that. Um, fundamentally, that. By the way, the reason that works is something in biology called Kleber's law. I'm not sure if you know about this, but Kleber's law is an observed fact about every single kind of organism, from the smallest single cell prokaryote to the largest human society considered as an organism. Okay. And what it says is that as the mass of the organism increases, the energy cost to operate the organism per unit mass decreases. Okay. So, for example, a gram of mouse might cost 100 units of energy to operate. A gram of elephant costs 75. Okay. And that's the ratio. It's about 25% advantage that you get from being an organism, which means that you're organized, which means that you have components that cooperate with each other. Okay. So when we have components of an organization cooperating with each other, we get back 25% more energy than we put in. Okay, that is the fundamental physical, source in physics, in thermodynamics, of all prosperity. All prosperity is created by cooperation that produces more together than we could produce individually. Um, um, uh, so a movement needs to be able to do that, needs to be able to have people that are working on different things, but they're cooperating. So we may be working on a third party, we're cooperating, working on a third party, we're also cooperating on transforming the Democratic Party. We're working on lobbying for universal health care. We're also working on building systems that can hold candidates or electeds accountable to the desire of the people for universal health care, for example.
Let me ask this question. Has there been a conversation with Curtis about like using resources in this fashion going forward for candidates coming up through the pipeline for things like that? I mean, is he open to those conversations?
So we have a commitment from Curtis. He has committed um, to doing some kind of revenue sharing between the state party and the other units of the party, the county, congressional district, caucuses, etc. Um, that's what he said. He has not provided any details about how he wants to do that. I have suggested to him that we should have a group that works on how to figure that out, but that has not moved past that stage at this point.
Well, maybe they need to have a meeting so they can pull these things together and make them happen.
Yeah. The so so he so Curtis when I asked him about that about meetings and stuff like that, Curtis said, well, I need to hire a director of party affairs to do all that scheduling and stuff. So we hired a director of party affairs about a week and a half ago. So we should start seeing some of those things. But the thing is that we have to bring this stuff up because otherwise it's not gonna come up. Yeah. So the idea of this series of discussions is that this was sort of like baseline, how do we think about this stuff? And then the next session is supposed to be on on how we get a culture that values these kinds of things. What do we need? Um what kinds of things, what kinds of story, what kinds of values do we have to tell in our culture? What kinds of values do we have to express in our stories um, in order to make democracy actually happen? Because it's not enough to say, "Hey, we should have these special rules." Because we actually need things that people can actually do, like for example how we communicate with each other. Um, uh, there are there are ways of communicating that are designed to shut down thoughts and ideas, and there are ways of communicating with each other that are designed to open up possibilities and create room for engagement and discussion and things like that. And some of these things are just very basic about what how we interact with each other, how we think about each other, how we listen to each other. So, for example, I recommend there's um have you ever heard of Marshall Rosenberg? I may have mentioned him to you before. But he has a great thing on it's called nonviolent communication. Um, and those kinds of things, not necessarily that particular version of it, but those kinds of things are the kinds of things that I want to talk about next time, and to go a little bit deeper into these ideas. Um, but we only had two people here this time, and I'd also be interested in running another session like this where we get more people and have more discussion and more engagement on this kind of issue. And so for that, I'd also like to get some feedback. Any comments on the slides or the discussion or anything that you have recommendations for improvement or anything? I'd appreciate it.
No, I would
So
love to.
Leon,
Yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, 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 go
Um,
ahead.
so Leano, first of all, thank you so much. And I'm driving. You did an excellent job. Um, I just want to say that I wouldn't change anything. I just thank God for your knowledge. Like I got some things that I'm trying to educate people on, and just you are full of wisdom and knowledge when it comes to the political arena. So yes, I'm glad that it was just us because Michelle, thank you, Michelle. She asked so many questions where I was like, wait a minute, that don't make sense. And then she'll just burn out and say, you know what does that mean? So thank you, Michelle, for just stepping up and saying, you questioned everything that Liano said. Thank you for that. But I wouldn't have any other way if it's just two of us. I will be here for the next one. And I understand that you want to do another one to have a bigger turnout, but I think you did amazing with just so thank you. And then one more thing, Michelle, I would love to be where you're at. Girl, those trees are beautiful. All right, I'm signing off. I'll talk to y'all later.
I'm sitting on my back deck.
Hmm.
No, but Liana, I wonder if some of the difficulty is it's the middle of summer and it's just finally feels like summer really hit and
Mhm.
people are doing stuff. Um, I would love to have you come and do a wee group thing. We're on a minute of hiatus because of summer.
Mhm.
But I feel like we just got to have it's just got to happen more often.
Yeah.
Um, which I feel makes me feel bad for you because this is you're not getting paid to do all this stuff. Um, but I think maybe if I can, I'm going to have a conversation with Rachel and we maybe do an in person at our next wee thing about this. If and I think you have said
Yeah.
you're open to it.
100%.
But then how do we do it like even more on a bigger scale? That's like it
Right.
makes me wonder if there was a way to just do like just an online video of it, an online little slideshow that we could
Mhm.
share easily. I don't know, YouTube kind of a thing. Um,
Yeah. Well, I
it,
mean, so this is recorded, and I'll publish this on our YouTube page.
okay,
We have a YouTube page,
okay.
and we can share this as a start. Um, but I think that I think that you know um, I would like to do a number of these, so I'm
Okay.
happy to go to,
Okay.
and have more engagement and more back and forth and stuff like that. And I'm happy to do it in person, wherever.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that people need to be thinking about, if we're going to escape from this cycle of constantly reproducing the system that we're trying to get rid of because we haven't thought about what's actually going on in the system, you know.
I think it'll be helpful. I think it'll be helpful for the my solidarity piece in terms of if people are like, yeah, I am sick of things. Um, I'm willing to drive to wherever, whenever these meetings happen and cast those votes. And if not just for the education that this brings, that's the piece I can do. Um,
Right.
so yeah, and I am again grateful for seeing this whole thing because kind of lit a fire again. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it was helpful.
Yeah.
To like and then me go back to this letter I'm supposed to be writing for you that I like dropped the ball on.
Okay.
It's I think is super helpful. Helpful for me to then want to share it with
Right.
others so that we can maybe get them on for the next meeting. they'll be
Right.
caught up. And
Yeah.
I'll be more than happy to share and all
Yeah.
of that stuff too. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah. No problem. No problem. Happy to do it. And do you know when the next one is? Do you guys have that information? Let me
I do, because I actually already shared on. I had people today that were like, "Oh, I'd love to come, but I can't make it today."
mhm.
That's why I asked about if it's being recorded,
Yeah.
and I shared it on the Wii page. August 2nd was August 2nd, one of them.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Um,
I just gotta open up and see it's July 19th is growing democratic culture,
okay,
and Saturday, August 2nd is best practices.
okay. Yeah, as soon as you get this for YouTube, will you send it to me? Because
Yep.
there are a couple people I specifically want to send it to.
Yeah.
And then, we can push more on the July one, July 19th.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay,
Cool.
awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Tamisha. Thank you, Michelle. And I'm gonna keep plugging at this, and looking forward to talking about the growing democratic culture piece next time.
Sounds good. Thank
Sounds
you.
good. You guys have a good one. Thank you,
You
Leano.
good
Thanks,
rest of your weekend.
Michelle.
Yep.
Yep,
All
Bye-bye.
right,
you
you
too.
too. All
Yep,
right.
yep.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye.